Well, before we really get into the topic of safety itself, I think we have to actually reframe the terminology we're using. Safety is a common word, but is it really safety, Don?
That's a great question, Jeff. We oftentimes see aviation teams use this word, we need to be safe. We are going to be as safe as possible. The reality is that's binary. You know, the only safe thing you can do in that aspect is to park the airplanes in the hangar and go home, you know, not operate them. No different than in business. You know, you cannot operate a business while accepting risk. And so what I really encourage is both of the aviation team and downtown that we use the language you do in business, which is risk. You know, what is acceptable risk? What is unacceptable risk? What's our risk appetite? And we can begin to divide that into different categories. In this area, we tend to talk about operational risk. What are those issues, then how we manage the team, operate the team that introduce risk? Your aviation team will use the word safety.
Mm. And that risk spectrum is quite broad.
Absolutely.
You have what the FAA mandates, but then you have way out here, no fault failures at all. So how do you find out where you fall in that spectrum?
You know, really, at the end of the day, the most important question you ask yourself is what risks are we willing to accept and not? A lot of times I'll sit with a business leader and they'll say, I want the best aviation team there can be. I want no risk. Well, that's not reasonable. And so I'll explain to them, I say, you know, really the lowest risk operation out there paints their airplane blue, flies 3 to 4 airplanes for every mission. They send their limos ahead of time on a separate aircraft. And we call that the 89th, and they're based out of Andrews Air Force Base. And they spend money at a rate that would make your head spin. That's really not what you're looking for, most executives. So we then step into the conversation is, let's go with what you know. When you look at your aviation team, do you want the level of risk management to be the same as, less, or more than when you ride on a commercial air carrier, or what we refer to as the 121 world, the FAA 121 world? And most of the time, the executive looks at me and goes, when I ride on my airplane, I expect it to be better than when I ride on the airlines. Mm. That, by definition, sets a philosophical or a strategic goal around how intentional risk management needs to be for the aviation team.
And how does that vary, though? Because we're not operating to 121 standards. It's governed differently. Is this where the term best practices come in?
You can operate around best practices, but really the important part of this calculation is being really intentional, is beginning a process of measuring what risks are acceptable and what risks are not. And those can be divided into financial risks, brand risks, risks of damaging an aircraft, legal risks. We don't like to talk about it, but there are a lot of risks that are outside just bending an airplane. There's HR risks. We get into that topic in our risk management video where we talk about risk reviews, but in this area, your aviation team is really thinking about operational risk.
So Don, how does the corporate entity have visibility into what is happening at the aviation level?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a principle in aviation risk management that says that really healthy aviation teams have a line from the risk manager, or sometimes called the safety, officer, the safety, advocate at the aviation level, into the corporation. They might report to a general counsel, they might report to a compliance executive, they might have a regular meeting with the executive whom aviation reports. And that provides visibility for the aviation team that is separate from normal reporting. We suggest those meetings happen maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months as a regular discipline. And that's a 30-minute conversation. Hey, just want to let you know, here are the 5 biggest risks we're managing right now in the aviation team. Here's what we see coming around the corner, and here's how we're going to be mitigating it. It's appropriate also for the aviation team annually. In fact, many of the protocols require it to develop what's called a safety risk profile or risk profile, and where they sit back and ask themselves, okay, this upcoming year, what are really the risks, what's changing that we're going to be exposed to, and how are we going to address it?
Mm-hmm. And that reporting point into the organization is key. That also goes into where this report goes to? Is it too high
Yep.
or is it too low?
Yeah, and that's a very personal question for the corporation. You know, I would certainly suggest that it probably shouldn't go to a C-suite executive or an owner and a high net worth individual. It should be the individual who is the conscience of the corporation.
And has the power to make things happen.
And has the power to make things happen. That's oftentimes someone in the general counsel role, or if the organization has a compliance and risk group, it might be at that level.
So guys, what's the bottom line? What should the executive team and the reporting executive know about safety and risk management?
It's a great question, Jeff. I really think at the end of the day, it is asking the question, how do you intentionally identify, quantify, and mitigate risk? What's your process? Is it, just that seems good enough for me? Or is there a documented process for you to do that?
I think it's a team effort. I think it's important that the entire department know that this is going to be important to us and we're going to put a lot of energy into it. So whether you're a technician or you're a scheduler or you're a pilot or you're an administrator, I think if everyone needs to be on the same team developing the proper protocols to mitigate those risks and to make sure that it's being followed on a regular basis and it's not just put on the shelf somewhere.
I like his answer. That's a good one.